The engine of my dead wife's Navy Mercedes was still ticking in the cold. It sat sideways across my gate, a gleaming monument to my son-in-law's arrogance. He'd driven it here, to my home, on this windy Thursday night without my permission. He hadn't come for a visit. He'd come to issue an ultimatum. The polished chrome of the grille caught the porch light, a smug smile in the dark. He was here to take the villa, the last piece of her I had left. Inside my study, the air was warm, smelling of old paper and the leather of my reading chair. Through the double-paned glass, I heard the frantic, discordant sound of the brass wind chimes Marina had hung years ago. They were clattering against each other in the violent gusts, a sound that usually calmed me, but now felt like a warning siren. The doorbell rang once, sharp and impatient. Adrian never knocked, he summoned. When I opened the door, he stood there, silhouetted against the night, looking down at me. "Victor," he said, the name a clipped, dismissive sound. "We need to talk about the Edger estate." He didn't even call it the villa. He held up the keys to Marina's car, dangling them from his finger. The silver key fob, a gift I'd given her, glinted under the light. He was holding my memory as hostage, using them as a weapon. My eyes fixed on that key fob. And in that instant, a memory surfaced, sharp and clear. Marina, laughing in the dealership showroom 20 years ago, insisting they program a second identical fob. "For emergencies, my love," she'd said with a wink. "An insurance policy." I had it somewhere upstairs, tucked away in a box of her things. A quiet tremor of an idea, a hidden leverage I hadn't thought of in years, began to form in my mind. I stepped aside, letting him in. A blast of cold, damp air followed him, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and entitlement. He strode past me as if I were the hired help. Outside, my daughter Chloe remained in the passenger seat of their own car, parked behind Marina's. Her face was a pale, indistinct oval in the darkness. Her staying out there, a silent partner in this ambush, was a betrayal all its own. She was letting her husband do the dirty work. Adrian walked directly to the mantelpiece, picking up a framed photo of Marina and me on the villa's terrace. "She would have wanted Chloe to have this place," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. "A clean break, no complications." He ran a thumb over her face in the photograph, a gesture of ownership that made my blood run cold. He spoke of her wishes as if he had ever bothered to know them, as if they aligned so perfectly with his own greed. "Marina left her share of the villa to me, Adrian," I stated, my voice lower than I intended, but firm. "We are co-owners." He scoffed. "Co-owners? Victor, we have a cash buyer. They're offering $1.2 million, and they want to close in 30 days. This isn't a negotiation. This is a notification." The number, so stark and transactional, was an insult to the decades of memories built within those walls. The house, usually a sanctuary of warmth and quiet comfort, suddenly felt cavernous and cold. Adrian's expensive cloying cologne warred with the familiar scent of the lemon oil I used on the antique furniture. Outside, the wind howled a mournful chorus, rattling the old window frames. It was a perfect storm, inside and out. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the 45-degree temperature of the November night. Finally, the front door opened again. Chloe stepped inside, pulling her thin cashmere wrap tighter around her shoulders. She wouldn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on a spot on the Persian rug, her expression carefully blank. Her silence was a suffocating weight in the room, a deliberate absence of support that hurt more than any of Adrian's blustering threats. She was a willing accomplice, and my heart fractured a little more. Her voice, when she finally used it, was thin and rehearsed. "Dad, it's for the best." Adrian found a legal firm, Sterling and Croft. They reviewed the title, and they say your survivorship claim is weak. It's just cleaner to sign it over, for everyone. She sounded like a stranger reading a script, every word a carefully placed stone in the wall she was building between us. "We claim?" The words echoed in the tense silence. I had used a significant portion of my own retirement funds, my banker's bonus from 1998, to help purchase that property. Chloe knew this. She'd heard the story a dozen times. She had squeezed my hand at her mother's funeral and promised we would get through it together. But that, I was beginning to understand, was only half the truth. Adrian slid a sheaf of papers from his briefcase onto the polished surface of the coffee table. The top page was titled in bold, sterile letters, "Voluntary Relinquishment of Title." "Our lawyers drafted this to make it easy for you," he said, his tone dripping with false magnanimity. "Sign it by tomorrow morning. If not, we file Monday. Things will get formal and very, very expensive for you." He punctuated his threat by tossing Marina's keys onto the stack of papers. The key fob clattered against the wood. I stared at it, noticing for the first time a tiny, hairline scratch near the Mercedes-Benz star. It was the original, no doubt. My focus narrowed to that single imperfection, a small, hard point of reality in a world that was dissolving into a nightmare of legal jargon and familial treason. That scratch was my anchor. I pushed the papers back toward him. "I'm not signing anything until my lawyer has seen it." Adrian let out a short, barking laugh. "What lawyer, Victor? Old man Hemlock? He retired a decade ago. We have a team of 4 associates on this. They specialize in asset recovery from recalcitrant family members. It's a whole department." He said it with pride, as if describing a noble profession. His voice rose, a performance for an unseen audience. "Don't be a sentimental old fool. You're 70 years old. You can't possibly manage a property like that anymore. This is about our future, our children's future, not your past." From the corner of my eye, I saw Mrs. Gable, my housekeeper of 15 years, peeking from the kitchen doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth. The humiliation was now public, witnessed. This was the arena he'd chosen. Chloe finally spoke again, her voice now edged with a chilling impatience that was so like her husband's. "Dad, he's right. Please, just sign. Don't make this a messy public fight. Think of the family's reputation. Think of the grandchildren." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. They were the ones creating the mess, the ones shattering the family. Yet they were cloaking their greed in the language of concern. The threats escalated. "A judge will see it our way," Adrian pressed on, leaning over the table. "We can petition for a competency hearing. Claim you're not fit to manage your own affairs. It's a simple process. They'll appoint Chloe as your conservator." "Do you really want that, old man?" The final 2 words were delivered with a quiet, deliberate cruelty, designed to strip away my last shred of dignity. I rose to my feet slowly, the bones in my knees protesting. I felt the slight, infuriating tremor in my hands and willed it to stop. For a moment, I did feel old. I felt worn down, outnumbered, and tired. But then, a cold, hard anger, the likes of which I hadn't felt in decades, began to solidify in my chest. "Get out," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through his tirade. "Get out of my house. Now." For a second, Adrian looked surprised, as if the furniture had spoken. Then his face hardened into a mask of contempt. "Friday, Victor, my office. Be there." He grabbed the papers, and Chloe, without another word or a backward glance, followed him out. The heavy oak door slammed shut, and the reverberation seemed to shake the entire house. Outside, the wind chimes fell silent, as if, in shock. I stood alone in the suffocating silence of the living room. My gaze fell upon the navy Mercedes, still defiantly blocking my driveway, a steel and glass declaration of war. He had left it there on purpose, a constant reminder of his power and my supposed powerlessness. I walked back to the table, my hand tracing the spot where the hateful document had lain. The quiet of the house was no longer peaceful, yet was the sound of being utterly alone. Ignoring the tremble in my hands, I turned and walked purposefully up the stairs to my bedroom. I didn't reach for the phone to find a new lawyer. Not yet. Instead, I went to the deep walk-in closet, to a high shelf at the very back. There sat a simple, sturdy shoebox, tied with a ribbon. It held the small, precious things of Marina's that I could never bring myself to file away or discard. Her essence was in that box. I lifted the lid. The scent of her, lavender and old paper, rose to meet me. It was a gut punch of memory and grief. My fingers, clumsy with age and anxiety, sifted past dried rose petals from our last anniversary, ticket stubs from a concert in 2012, a lock of Chloe's baby hair. I wasn't searching for sentiment. I was searching for ammunition. I was searching for her foresight, for the insurance policy she had mentioned with a smile. My fingers brushed against cool, smooth plastic. There it was, the duplicate key fob. It was pristine, the silver star unscratched, the navy casing still glossy, and wrapped tightly around it with a piece of yellowed tape was a small, folded note. My breath caught in my chest. My hands, which had been trembling, were suddenly rock steady. This was it. The tumblers of a long-locked memory were beginning to click into place. I carefully peeled the tape away and unfolded the brittle paper. Marina's elegant cursive script flowed across the small page. "Victor, my love," it read. "For the just in case we talked about. Remember? The important copy is filed with the San Mateo County Clerk, not with our personal papers. They have the original deed. Look for reference Covenant 7B418. It was a message from the past, a lifeline thrown across the years. Covenant 7B418, a specific official reference. It wasn't just a scribble, it was a file number, a destination. Back when she'd arranged it, I thought her just in case was about misplacing the house keys, a charming quirk. Now, the chilling precision of her planning settled over me like a shroud. This wasn't about a lost key. This was an ambush she had set for a betrayal she must have sensed was coming. Marina had always been 2 steps ahead, clutching the note and the cool plastic of the key fob. A cold wave of purpose washed over me. This was more than a legal document reference. It was a map, a strategy bequeathed to me by the woman who knew me best, knew us best. I looked out the window at her car, a dark sentinel in the night. Adrian meant for it to be a symbol of his impending victory. By morning, I would turn it into the first casualty of his defeat. At 5:30 a.m., the sky was the color of a dull bruise. A raw wind scraped through the bare branches of the oak trees lining the street. I didn't bother with a coat. The chill was a welcome shock, sharpening my senses. I walked down the stone path, the duplicate key fob heavy in my palm. The navy Mercedes loomed, its windows fogged with morning condensation. It looked like a ghost ship moored in my driveway. I pressed the unlock button. The car chirped softly, a familiar reassuring sound, and the lights flashed once. The door opened with a solid German-engineered dunk. Sliding into the driver's seat, the scent of the worn leather and a faint lingering trace of Marina's perfume filled the small space. For a heart-stopping moment, I wasn't a grieving widower on a mission. I was just a husband in his wife's car, the silence full of her memory. I started the engine, the quiet purr a defiant sound in the pre-dawn stillness. Reversing carefully, I maneuvered the car off the driveway and into the empty space in my garage. I closed the garage door with a quiet finality. The symbol of Adrian's siege was gone, swallowed by the house he sought to dismantle. This was the beginning of my quiet stakeout. I was no longer defending. I was preparing to advance. An hour later, I was in my own car, heading south to the San Mateo County Government Center. Traffic was already building, a river of red taillights flowing into the city. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I was a retired banker, a man who understood numbers and contracts. But this felt different. This wasn't business. This was an excavation, digging through the bedrock of my life to find a foundation Marina had secretly reinforced. The county clerk recorder's office was exactly as I remembered it from decades ago. Beige walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and the hushed, almost reverential air of officialdom. The air smelled of dusty paper and industrial-strength floor cleaner. It was a place where lives were neatly filed away, reduced to names, dates, and docket numbers on endless shelves. I felt like a ghost, searching for another ghost's final words. A young clerk with a bored expression looked up from her screen. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat. I slid Marina's note across the counter. "I need a copy of the original deed with this covenant attached. Reference 7B418. She squinted at the paper, typed the number into her computer with painstaking slowness, and then, without a word, disappeared into a back room filled with rolling metal shelves. The wait stretched into an eternity. I watched other people come and go, filing for marriage licenses, business permits, birth certificates. The mundane cycle of life, recorded and stamped. Finally, the clerk returned, holding a thick legal-sized document. "That'll be $18.50 for the certified copy," she said. I paid in cash, my hands steady as I took the papers. They felt heavier than their physical weight, dense with secrets. Sitting in my car, in the vast parking lot, I began to read. The language was dense, a thicket of legalese. But I pushed through, my banker's training kicking in, until I found it. Article 7, Restrictive Covenant. It had been added on March 12, 2005, the day we paid off the mortgage and owned the villa free and clear. I remembered that day. We drank champagne on a terrace. I thought we were celebrating financial freedom. But Marina was celebrating something else. The clause was a masterpiece of legal defects. It stated that while we held the property as joint tenants with right of survivorship, a specific condition was attached. If any attempt was ever made to sell a share of the property to a non-lineal descendant third party, the seller's entire interest in the property would be immediately and irrevocably forfeited. It wouldn't go to me. It would go to a trust. My breath hitched. Marina hadn't just protected me from Adrian. She had, with heartbreaking foresight, protected the estate from a future version of Chloe she must have feared. She had seen the weakness in our daughter, the way Adrian's ambition could curdle her good nature. She had loved Chloe enough to save her from her own worst instincts. And she'd done it without ever telling me. I had mourned her as my wife, but I had underestimated her as a strategist. My phone buzzed. It was Adrian. His name flashed on the screen, angry and red. I let it ring twice, then answered. "Where is the car, Victor?" he demanded, his voice tight with fury. "It's safe," I said calmly, my voice even. "It's in a secure location." "This isn't a game," he spat. "Oh, I know," I replied, and the line was quiet for a moment. "We'll see you at the lawyer's office tomorrow. Be ready to sign." He hung up. My next stop was a copy shop. I made 5 certified copies of the entire deed packet, including the page with the damning covenant. I had them notarized on the spot. I placed each copy into a separate manila envelope, labeling them precisely. One for me, one for my new lawyer, one for Sterling and Croft, one for the title company handling the sale, and one for the prospective buyer. I was building an arsenal of paper. On the drive home, a morbid curiosity made me take a detour past Chloe and Adrian's house. Parked in their driveway, gleaming under the afternoon sun, was a brand-new metallic black Cadillac Escalade. It was enormous, ostentatious, and still had the temporary dealer plates on it. They were already spending the commission. The sight of it didn't spark sadness anymore. It ignited a cold, clean flame of resolve. They had already convicted and sentenced me. That evening, I was pruning the dormant rose bushes along the tall garden hedge that bordered my property. The rhythmic snit of the shears was a calming sound in the twilight. Then I heard voices from the sidewalk on the other side of the hedge, muffled but getting closer. It was Adrian, and with him, Chloe. Their footsteps slowed as they passed my house. I froze, my shears hovering over a branch. Adrian's voice was low and smug. "I can't believe you moved the car." A pathetic little power play. "It doesn't matter." Sterling and Croft filed the preliminary petition for the competency hearing this afternoon. The judge will see it next week. It's a slam dunk. A competency hearing. The threat he'd made was real. They were already moving to have me declared mentally unfit. My blood ran ice cold. Then I heard Chloe's voice, small and laced with a pathetic imitation of guilt. "I feel bad, Ad. He seemed so lost last night." "Don't," Adrian snapped back, his tone sharp. "That money pays for the kid's Ivy League tuition. It pays for this house. It's our time. He's had his life. This is just cleaning up the estate." The transactional cruelty of it, the casual dismissal of my entire existence, stole the air from my lungs. They walked on, their voices fading. I stood there in the growing darkness, the shears heavy in my hand. The last vestiges of paternal affection, of hope for my daughter's conscience, withered and died in that moment. It wasn't just greed. They saw me as an obstacle to be managed, a problem to be legally erased. My quiet stakeout had yielded the final piece of intelligence I needed. There would be no mercy. I went back inside and sat at my desk, the neat stack of manila envelopes before me. The house was utterly silent except for the hum of the old refrigerator. For the second and final time, I thought of Marina's name with purpose. I remembered her in the hospital, weak but lucid, gripping my hand. "Protect what we build, Victor," she had whispered. "For us." At the time, I thought she meant memories. I was wrong. She meant this. My plan, which had been a defensive maneuver, now became an offensive strike. I spent an hour online, researching the firm Sterling and Croft. I read reviews, looked up their partners, and found a press release boasting about their elder asset transition division. They weren't just lawyers, they were predators who had turned family betrayal into a lucrative business model. And they had no idea they were walking into a perfectly laid trap. I didn't call an old friend. I called the Bar Association and asked for a referral to the most aggressive probate litigator they knew. They gave me a name, Amelia Davies. I sent her a brief, encrypted email with scans of the covenant and Adrian's threatening document. The subject line was simple: urgent matter regarding forfeiture under restrictive covenant 7B418. I knew the legal language would get her attention. She called me back in 22 minutes. Her voice was a weapon, sharp, precise, and completely devoid of sentiment. "Mr. Thorne," she said, "I've reviewed your documents. This isn't just a strong case, it's a closed loop. The moment your son-in-law and daughter signed a purchase and sale agreement with a third party, they triggered the reversionary clause. They did our work for us. Have they signed such an agreement yet?" "They mentioned a cash buyer, closing in 30 days. I said. "Excellent," Ms. Davies replied, a chilling satisfaction in her tone. "Then they've already committed the act of forfeiture. Legally, as of that signature, your daughter's 50% share ceased to exist. It reverted to the Marina Thorne Trust. I've looked that up too. You are the sole trustee and beneficiary. You don't own half the villa, Mr. Thorne. You own all of it." The world tilted on its axis. The full weight of Marina's genius crashed down on me. She had not just created a shield, she had forged a sword and handed it to me across time. My daughter and her husband hadn't just overplayed their hand. They had, with their own signatures, lit the fuse on their own financial ruin. They had legally disinherited themselves in their rush to steal what was mine. A chilling calm settled over me. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a corporate takeover. I looked at the clock on the mantel. 9:14 p.m. The Friday morning meeting at the lawyer's office was the arena Adrian had chosen for my surrender. But it would be his. I stood up and walked to the hall closet, taking out my best navy suit, the one I wore to board meetings. The quiet stakeout was over. It was time for the final transaction. The offices of Sterling and Croft were on the 40th floor of a glass tower that scraped the sky. The lobby was a symphony of chrome and navy marble, designed to intimidate. A young receptionist with a surgically perfect smile directed me to a corner conference room. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled below, a toy set for the men who ruled it from these heights. I was meant to feel small here. Adrian and Chloe were already seated at a long, polished mahogany table. A man I presumed was their lawyer beside them. Adrian wore a smug, predatory grin. Chloe, again, refused to meet my eyes, staring at her perfectly manicured hands. She was a ghost at her own execution. The room was cold, the air conditioning a low, constant hum that seemed to amplify the tension. Their lawyer, a man named Croft, slid the same hateful document across the table toward me. "Mr. Thorne, glad you decided to be reasonable. If you'll just sign here and here, we can transfer the funds by Monday." He tapped a gold pen on the signature line. His voice was smooth, practiced, the sound of easy victories and exorbitant fees. He didn't even bother with introductions. I didn't look at their papers. Instead, I placed my own briefcase on the table and clicked it open. I removed 5 copies of a notarized deed packet. I slid one across the table to Croft, one to Adrian, and one to Chloe. "I believe you'll find," I said, my voice resonating with a calm authority I hadn't felt in years, "that this document supersedes yours. Please direct your attention, Article 7, Covenant 7B, 418. There was a moment of confused silence. Croft picked up the document with an annoyed sigh, as if I were a child presenting a crayon drawing. He began to read, his eyes scanning the first page dismissively. Adrian snorted. "What is this, Dad? Some old paperwork you found? It's irrelevant." But as Croft's eyes moved down the page, his expression began to change. The professional veneer cracked. He read the clause once, then a second time. The silence in the room became a physical presence. The hum of the air conditioning seemed to grow louder. Croft's face, which had been a mask of condescending confidence, slowly drained of color. He looked up from the paper, his gaze darting from me to Adrian, a flicker of panic in his eyes. "Did you," he asked Adrian, his voice a strained whisper, "enter into a signed purchase and sale agreement for this property?" Adrian, still oblivious, puffed out his chest. "Of course we did. Got a signed offer last Tuesday. Cash, no contingencies. Why?" Croft closed his eyes for a moment, a man watching a train wreck in slow motion. He slowly pushed the papers back across the table, as if they were contaminated. "Because by signing that agreement," he said, enunciating every word with a lawyer's pained precision, "you triggered this reversionary clause. You forfeited your entire claim." Chloe finally looked up, her face a canvas of disbelief. "What? What does that mean?" Adrian's smirk vanished, replaced by a dark, thunderous confusion. "Forfeited? That's insane. That's not legal." "Oh, it's very legal," a new voice cut in. Amelia Davies strode into the room, exuding an aura of lethal competence. "And as of this morning, I filed an action to quiet title on behalf of the sole beneficiary of the Marina Thorne Trust, my client, Mr. Victor Thorne." She placed her own briefcase on the table, a stark contrast to mine. It was modern, aluminum, and opened with a sharp, metallic snick. "It means, Miss Thorne," she continued, addressing my daughter directly, "that your share of the villa is gone. It means your father now owns 100% of the property. It also means you are likely in breach of contract with your buyer, for which you can be sued for non-performance. You tried to sell something you no longer owned." Adrian's face was a mottled mess of red and white. He leaped to his feet, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You did this. You tricked us." Miss Davies answered for me, her voice like ice. "No, Mr. Fletcher. Your own greed did this. Your wife's mother did this, 20 years ago. All Mr. Thorne did was read the paperwork, something your counsel here clearly failed to do. A rather glaring act of professional malpractice, wouldn't you say, Mr. Croft?" Croft sank lower in his chair, avoiding everyone's gaze. He was ruined. The entire foundation of their attack had crumbled to dust. Chloe began to cry, not tears of remorse, but the thin, hiccuping sobs of a spoiled child who has had a toy snatched away. The sound was ugly and hollow in the sterile room. It held none of the weight of her earlier, calculated silence. But Adrian wasn't finished. His rage boiled over. "I'll fight this. I'll take you to court for years. I'll drain every last cent you have, you old bastard." Miss Davies smiled, a chilling, razor-thin expression. "Please do," she said. "We also have a signed affidavit from Mr. Thorne's housekeeper, who witnessed your threats, and a copy of the petition you filed for a competency hearing, which we will be presenting as evidence of malicious intent. It's called elder abuse." The words elder abuse hung in the air like poison gas. Adrian recoiled as if struck. The fight visibly drained out of him, replaced by the dawning horror of utter, absolute defeat. He had tried to weaponize the system against A, and now that same system was turning its full, crushing weight on him. He wasn't just losing the villa. He was facing public disgrace and possible criminal charges. I looked at my daughter, her face buried in her hands. There was no victory in this, only a profound, echoing sadness for what had been irrevocably broken. The financial sting would be severe, but the destruction of trust, of family, was total. They had wagered everything on my weakness and had lost it all to their own avarice and Marina's ghost. Miss Davies was not one for sentiment. We have also, she continued, pulling another document from her case, taken the liberty of preparing this. It's a cease and desist letter. It demands no further contact with my client, verbal, written, or by proxy. It also demands the immediate return of his personal property. She looked pointedly at Adrian. That would be the key fob to Mrs. Thorne's Mercedes-Benz. With a shaking hand, his face a mask of pure hatred, Adrian reached into his pocket and threw the original key fob across the table. It skittered across the polished wood and came to a stop in front of me. The tiny, hairline scratch I had noticed before seemed to catch the light. It was the symbol of their arrogance, their certainty. Now, it was a token of their surrender. I pocketed it without a word. I stood up. The meeting concluded. There was nothing more to say. The legal machinery was now in motion, and it would grind on without any further input from me. Miss Davies had everything under control. I had been underestimated, humiliated, and threatened. But in this quiet, cold room, 40 floors above the city, the balance had been restored, not through anger, but through the quiet, meticulous execution of a dead woman's last wish. Chloe finally lifted her head, her face blotchy and swollen. "Dad, wait," she pleaded, her voice cracking. Her appeal, coming now, was an obscenity. It was a plea not for forgiveness, but for a reversal of consequences. She was not sorry for the betrayal, only for its failure. I looked at her, my daughter, and felt nothing but the vast, cold emptiness of a burned-out star. Miss Davies gathered her papers, her movements crisp and efficient. "We are finished here," she announced to the room at large. She nodded to me, a gesture of professional respect. I had been her client for less than 24 hours, but we were a ruthlessly effective team. I had provided the ammunition. She had fired the shot with perfect, lethal accuracy. The predators had become the prey. Without looking back at the wreckage of my family, I turned and walked toward the heavy glass door of the conference room. My footsteps were steady on the navy marble floor. The city stretched out before me, bright and clear under the late morning sun. I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the cool, smooth plastic of the duplicate key fob Marina had left me. I pushed the door open.